Okay, Melly, go for it.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 6th Annual Pat Conroy Literary Festival, which is made possible this year by the generous support of Robert S. Handler Trust and a South Carolina Humanities Growth Grant. We're also grateful to today's host venue, the Technical College of the Lowcountry, for making this space available to us. Our next author session features a conversation between friends and novelist Jennifer Daniels Neal, author of The Locke Box, and Estelle Ford-Williamson, author of Rising Fawn. Jennifer Daniels Neal is an award-winning singer/songwriter, author, and teaching artist with the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. She and her husband, Jeff Neal, have released 9 music albums, a picture book, and 1 pair of twins into the world. Mrs. Neal recently published her debut novel, The Locke Box, and just yesterday taught the Conroy Festival's first ever songwriting workshop. She's visiting us from her home in Lookout Mountain, Georgia. Estelle Ford-Williamson is a novelist and memoirist whose most recent book, Rising Fawn, has won awards from the Sandhills Writers Conference and the Atlanta Writers Conference. Her previous books were Abbeville Farewell, a novel of early Atlanta and North Georgia, and Seed of South Sudan, a memoir of a lost boy refugee, written with Majak Marrier. She has received Poets and Writers grants for readings and workshops in Atlanta and New York, and has presented memoir workshops through our Pat Conroy Literary Center, as well as for the Lou Walker Senior Center in DeKalb County, Georgia. Mrs. Ford-Williamson now makes her home here in the Lowcountry, and she has also taught a character development writing workshop for the festival earlier this week. Please welcome Jennifer Daniels Neal and Estelle Ford-Williamson.
We are so excited to be here. I'm Estelle Ford-Williamson, and this is my friend Jennifer Neal. Jennifer Daniels Neal. I have to get used to adding the Neal because now she's a writer, as well as she's always been a singer-songwriter. She's now a published author. She's now going by Jennifer Daniels Neal. We met a long time ago. I was a writing instructor, tutor at Clayton State College in Clayton State University in Morrow, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. And there was a note going around through our email communications that said there was going to be a concert, and Jennifer Daniels was the person, very attractive album cover, and it said she lives in a cabin on Lookout Mountain. And I said, great, because I was born and raised in Chattanooga. I knew Lookout Mountain pretty well, but I didn't know Jennifer's work. My sister had been a singer and is still a singer, but was very active with a group that I used to follow. I was a groupie. So I went to this concert that she had in the cafeteria. Most people did not check to see that this was Youth University Week. It was in the middle of the summer, and the campus was full of middle schoolers. And they were in the cafeteria by the dozens. There were no adults in the room other than Jennifer and her husband, myself, and Jeff, the guy that arranged for them to be there. But they put on a concert, acoustic music, electronic, just so beautifully. Not a mention of where are your parents, or gee, this is unusual. Just so professional. I thought that is really cool. Not a miss. And found out they often were at Eddie's Attic in Decatur, which is where the Indigo Girls got their start. It was a great listening room. Eddie Owens has since left and gone to the Red Clay Theater in Duluth, and she plays in places like that. And I saw her at a festival in Rome, and I kind of followed her because I love following a musician, getting their albums, listening to them. They're part of what helped me write Rising Fawn. Coincidentally, Rising Fawn is set in Atlanta, but it goes quickly to Lookout Mountain, and there's a community that's on top of the mountain and in the valley called Rising Fawn that was the site of coal mining and coke ovens and all kinds of stuff in the 1870s. So they became part of my novel. And Jennifer became part of my novel because I had to have music in the novel. And she and Jeff show up as Jean and Jane, I think, in an old cabin on what they used to call the backside of Lookout Mountain, the Alabama side of Lookout Mountain. That means the most rural, the most desolate or uninhabited part of the mountain, or one of the most. So anyway, that's how we met. And then I called her and I said, guess what, I'm doing my novel. And she said, oh, guess what, I'm doing a novel too, So
And Estelle said, I'm doing my first. And we got into a big fight. No, we didn't.
You and my first.
I just thought they needed some drama.
Oh. So here's a little drama from Jennifer and Jeff. You'll see why I follow them, and a lot of other people follow them too. All over the Southeast, not just Southeast, but Ohio and all up and down the East Coast, Texas.
Or you want to sit there? You can sit.
Sit to your
Okay. Do you have a pick? I've already lost mine. Oh no, I didn't. I had it. Honey.
Great.
No, ma'am.
She's not going to sit.
You know I can't.
I know she can't.
Y'all, thanks for being here. This is huge fun for me to be a for real author now. I love it. And Estelle has been so kind to me, and sort of, I just feel like she took us under her wing and showed us the ropes of it. So thank you for that. This is so we released the novel, The Locke Box, and we also released an album, songs from the Locke Box. And this is kind of a theme that runs through the whole book. I can tell that you've lost your way. It's been 12 months ago to the day I would pluck him right out of his grave if I could. You'd let me into your house, I'd be as still and as quiet as a mouse. Baby, I will
the last page, read the last page first, gets into the story.
But don't
that-
really.
Gets into the story that Jennifer tells in the Locke Box. Locke is the name of the man that she meets. He's gorgeous. He's gorgeous. Gosh, the novel just reads so quickly, and I'm in love with this guy. Do you have his phone number?
He's married.
I'm
Oh,
married.
no, don't
I'm
tell
married.
him. He's
Wait,
not yet.
I'm married. I can't do that. But anyway,
Yeah, that too.
Locke Box. So it's part police procedural, part child services procedural. What do you do with a baby found, in an unusual circumstance, and what happens to that child? It's a romance. It's really a romance, but it's a romance that's very sensual, but there's not a lot of sex in it, which is kind of interesting. But that if you're waiting for that, don't wait for that. This is not.
Were you waiting?
Yeah.
I totally
I
disagree
know.
with you on that
I was
part.
talking
You were
about
waiting
this
for an
guy.
erotica novel, weren't you?
It's very erotic, but it's not. It's a good book. And then it's just a well-told story, and it's also kind of it gives you the part about or the life of a hearing person who helps people who are not hearing, who also experience spontaneous deafness herself. The narrator, the narrator voice. So you have all these things going on in a very, very interesting book. And I have to ask you, where did you get the idea for writing? I mean, here, this woman is written up in Pace magazine. She's compared to Flannery O'Connor as far as the voice, the haunting songs that she composes and sings. I got intrigued with her Celtic songs that have more of the Celtic influence. And in my book, in Rising Fawn, my main character is becoming aware of her Irish heritage for the first time, her Italian and Irish. Didn't know that she had any of these connections in her life as a successful life coach in Atlanta. She had no idea she went back to the mountains in terms of her background. So Jane, or Jennifer's music, is really tuning her into this wandering kind of music that would have been typical of the Celtic. There's, no identifiable refrain, but these wild vocalizations. So you have this wonderful voice. I compared her to Joni Mitchell in terms of the range, the shifting range. Is just fascinating. So you've got all this going on. You and Jeff have your hands full. You've got twins.
We do. We've had them a while.
Where did you get the idea of
I think you say, where did you get the twins? Which is also a wild story. The idea for the novel. So, we're 23 years into marriage and this career of songwriting and touring, 200 shows a year, like just hardcore on the road. And for the first 10 years, that's hardcore on the road. And then we got pregnant, which we didn't actually mean to do. Like, we always wanted to have kids, but it was sort of a, glorious handicapping accident. And it ended up being twins, which led to all these, I think as creatives, and probably most of you are writers and creatives, I think you have to juggle a lot of things to keep this going. I mean, unless, you win the lottery, you hit it big and you have hits or whatever. So we're juggling all these things, and now we have twins, and we're really having to rethink, okay, well, how do we give them roots in our community? And so I get involved in kids' music. I start working with a kids author and doing lots of that kind of stuff. We continue on with our adult shows, not adult shows, but shows not necessarily for kids. And we're writing all these songs. So, for all ages. And I think the novel might have been a reaction to too much kids' music or a midlife crisis. I woke up, I had a dream. You know how creatives will have these dreams, right? And you wake up and you're like, oh, I gotta write that down. So I forced myself out of bed. I think I'm gonna wrangle this dream scene into a song. And instead, by the end of the day, I'm 4 chapters into a novel I never really meant to write. But then I fell in love so hard with the characters. And now I've written a couple novels, and this is the only published one. I I don't know, like I got the bug. It is so much fun, and it always feels so much bigger than I am, at least. Did you get this, did you feel this writing Rising Fawn? That at times it was just bigger than you, and it was just...
Those characters were with me so much of the time, and one of the neat things about being a writer, you want to take your readers to another place. It's their escape, right? And what greater place than, just wild mountain sides, where you can just imagine getting lost. When I grew up, Lookout Mountain was where we went for a festival, one of the first art festivals in the South. It was called Plum Nelly, because this place that it was, which is where Claire ends up living in a single wide trailer, is Plum out of Tennessee and Nelly out of Georgia. It's Lookout Mountain. There's this long diagonal mountain that starts in Tennessee, goes and ends up in Alabama. So Plum Nelly was Plum out of Tennessee, Nelly out of Georgia. And it's a wild mountain ledge, something like out of Snuffy Smith. Anybody remember the comic Snuffy Smith? They live on a ledge. Well, this is a ledge. And so just getting into those spaces and just, although much of it I was writing down here, or I was writing in Atlanta, I could, as a child, because of those childhood experiences, I could remember the feeling of it. I've been up there since, and intermittently, but I always came back to the wildness of it. And there was a waterfall that we used to go to as family members. There wasn't access to it. It was called Little Lake. It does have access now through a conservancy. But it was just old railroad property. You'd go down this grade, what was the railroad grade, which was now a road in, and then it was just this rock creek with waterfall, water coursing through there, and then it would drop off into a crater lake that was aquamarine. It was so deep, and there were stories about somebody who'd broken their neck diving off the side into it. Just all these wild stories, and then it runs off and drops 100 feet to the floor of the gorge. All that's free, and just that's what we did as that was our family reunion place. That was picnicking place. As teenagers, we would go there. That was recreation when I was growing up. It was just so much fun. So getting into that, being able to go those places, you become obsessed. And your characters, you become obsessed with them. Mine started from a friend of mine, very sleek professor, professional woman. She was a training director for a large corporation in Atlanta. Always neatly coiffed. We met after she
Coiffed
retired.
is a great word.
Yeah, how about coiffed? And she was just like that. She was, very, very good at what she did. And turns out that she was from West Virginia. Her family were out Italian, and they were coal miners. And I said, really, coal miners, Italians? Okay. So then I started hooking up with people in Atlanta who reunion every year. Coal miners reunion at the third weekend in September every year, all over the country, particularly in the mountain areas. But they, in Atlanta, they moved there from the mountains, so they did that. They were even doing it when I was up there at Little Lake when I was invited to the reunion there. It's just kind of amazing thing. So all these, that person, and then a woman I was friends with, have been friends with 30 years. She had been from Pittsburgh, grew up in a household, it was a three-generation household. There was a lot of screaming that went in the household. The grandmother was the Italian grandmother, and then her father was in the household, and then her mother, who was Irish. Apparently she was not well liked, and so there was a lot of conflict. So my friend reacted to that by just leaving everything in Pittsburgh, everything Italian, didn't have any identity with it, although her hair was black, skin was very Italian. But it oozed out of her. She loved sculpture. She could garden like nothing you've ever seen. Her food was great. Everything, her gifts were always magnificent. Anyway, it's just a way I wanted to show through my character how you can squash something down, but it just comes out anyway. And that's kind of what happens with Claire. But anyway, Did I get obsessed? Yes, I talked too long. How about with yours?
And this waterfall that Estelle is mentioning, I live a stone's throw from it, and we didn't even know each other until we were adults, well into our adulthood.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's just kind of neat that we have these very similar backgrounds and love of that same land. And then
Rosemary Danielle used to teach art in the schools,
Mhm.
and she did that in Rising Fawn area. And she had a story. She says, everybody has a Lookout Mountain story. Right? That was really true. So
We went to the hang gliders bluff. We live about 5 minutes from this really popular hang gliders bluff. And Kate and I went, my daughter Kate and I went the other day, and the gliders were just coming like literally right eye level. Like we could have jumped on this guy as he went by. We did not.
Oh wow.
And he waved at us. He like took his hand off. He was like, he waved, and we're like, oh my goodness.
Oh, you spoke.
It's just still so magical, even though I've lived there all my life, you know.
Yeah. It is. It's a magical place.
So
that's-
y'all come visit.
That's where
We're getting new carpet this week. We'll be presentable in our home.
Anyway, when I finished my book and I told her about it, she says, "Oh, you need to get that published." And then when it was actually published, we got to be on your video blog, and I think we did an interview through the Pat Conroy Center, which was really fun. Where has your book taken you, or are you taking it with you to the concerts that you do? Is that kind of how you're doing it?
Certainly. So we released the Locke Box in August, and I think I told you it has an album that goes with it. So songs from Locke Box, and the Locke Box went with us on tour, and we played Tybee Island. That's not far from here. Yeah, we played that little post theater, which was sweet. And Paula Deen came, which I was like, oh, that's Paula Deen. And my kids are like, she's famous. And it was fun, and she was just like I thought she would be.
Could I interject for a moment?
Yeah.
She entertained 150 children and their parents in the early show that day. I mean, that's how powerful this lady is with the singing.
Playing for kids is not unlike playing for drunk people.
Yeah.
So we had a blast. No, all the same tricks work, you know, and they're not afraid to tell you what for whenever they want. We have a ball with kids' concerts. We do lots of music and movement, and Jeff and I go into the schools and do a week-long project called Songwriting is Writing. And Monday and Tuesday, we write the songs with the kids. By Wednesday, we are recording. By Friday, they've got this fully produced. Jeff does the drums and the bass and all of it, and it just gets bigger than life. And
It's
so,
like Camp Conroy on the road.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
So it's super fun.
That's great.
I don't know if that's what you asked, but that was my answer.
So you're still touring. First of all, how did you get the writing done when you've got 13-year-old twins, 12?
Well, you have to remember, COVID wiped out our entire. I was in Savannah on March 12th of that year. 2020?
Yeah.
And I got back home the 13th. Our whole schedule wiped out for a year. And we were just like, started praying, please help us. We got gigs, and God was so awesome. Like just gigs came out of the woodwork. People were so generous to us online when we would do shows. But all to say, I had tons of time then that would have been devoted to organizing and booking and touring to write this book. And Jeff will say, you know, like, are you going to go see your friends tonight? And I would be like, oh, you should see what they're doing now. And I would just laugh out loud, or else I'd be crying my eyes out. My kids would be like, what is wrong, Mother?
Did you read certain parts to Jeff at different times?
Yeah, well,
you know, this is really juicy. What do you think?
he was encouraging me to live in those scenes. He was like, no, you should work on that more. Just keep thinking about that scene. I said, just live there. But it's funny because my friends, especially, okay, so my friend Bob was my police resource, and so I would call him, but would this happen? My editor said, I don't think this person would ever be able to have a gun here, and so I called my friend Bob, you know, is this true? Would he be able to get away with this? And I would just get all of the police procedural, as you would say, the police advice, and then he read the book after I was done. He was like, woman, the things that are coming out of your head made me have to put the phone down. I mean, I had to put the book down. Because it's funny when your friends read stuff that came out of your head, I guess, that they're like, whoa, I can't think of that way.
I don't want to think of you doing that. I don't want to think of you writing that.
But it was fun. I took it as a compliment. It was, yeah, it was great.
The main character is a hearing coach, I guess, or someone who helps those.
She's a sign language professor. She's a young woman. She got her doctorate very early, and she went deaf when she was 15, and she was deaf from 15 till she went to Gallaudet School for the deaf and hard of hearing, but she went as a hearing person. And yeah, she was elective deaf.
And why did you get interested in a sign language professor?
I love language. I love it so much. When I was in high school, I'm a very auditory person. I mean, I write songs and I sing them, and I'm not at all a visual learner. Like, if I'm ever halfway dressed, it's because Jeff took a look at me and said, okay, now wait, you need to button here. You know, like, I'm just not very visual. And so I saw this book in high school, Seeing Voices. And it was so interesting to me. It was nonfiction and just, all about the deaf community and how there's this kind of a fierce pride in living deaf and, with the capital D, the deaf community. And that was amazing to me. And how, a lot of times the people who are deaf would not consider themselves at all handicapped. It's just a different approach to life. It's a different culture. So that really moved me. And thinking about, the moving voice. I'm all into dance and movement, so a moving, silent voice, not necessarily silent, but was really intriguing to me, and always has been. And I didn't know that Emma was deaf until she told me. This is the funnest thing about writing. Do y'all do this in your own stories? When your characters tell you stuff, and you're like writing, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And here the scene goes a different way. I love that part of it. It is the most magical thing in the world when your characters do, or you find out something about their backstory that you didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's really cool.
Well, did you have to do a lot of research? Did you go to Gallaudet or,
No, well, I've studied it just myself, just out of curiosity. Through the years, I studied it a little bit, and I followed them on Instagram, if that counts as research.
Oh, yeah.
And so I like to keep up with what's going on in the school. I'm just interested in it. I've never even been. It's in D.C., so I should go. We go to Baltimore all the time. We recorded the album there.
Well, we got to change that. We got a place for you. Okay.
Okay.
The Gallaudet was started at the same time it's part of the Freedmen's Bureau. When the enslaved people were freed, the Freedmen's Bureau was set up, and of course that some of Penn Center here has a history of that because it was the first school for freed blacks, and so it was under that administration for a long time. I happen to know because the best man at our wedding was a professor there. During the 70s, during the oil crisis, he had a PhD in history, and the only job he could get was, even as a hearing person, was at Gallaudet. So he was one of the few hearing people that taught there. And so I got to know a little bit about deaf experiences. The one thing that I found was interesting, that's why I was asking you the other day, she went deaf at 15, that seemed a little unusual, because most deafness starts with birth, and that's why it's so difficult to learn language, because they have never heard language. Blindness is often later, accidental, it can be genetic, obviously, but so it's a different
You mean
handicap.
verbal language?
Yeah, right, verbal language. And of course, at that time, there still is a big fight between those who are lip readers and those who are sign language. Sign language is considered more freeing to people, but some people are very insistent. This is my world. This is the way I do it. But it's sometimes a little disturbing when people hear a deaf person speaking, and it's a kind of a shriek. Can be a shriek in some cases because they have not heard. They have not heard. So there's
a hilarious scene in Coda. Have y'all seen Coda, the movie, Apple TV movie? It's really great. And so Coda is child of deaf adult. And then it's also a musical term that, it's the ending of a piece of music that sort of reorients you, reminds you of different patterns that have already gone through the music. So this girl is a hearing child, but her parents are deaf, and her brother's deaf, and she interprets for her family, but she joins the school chorus. So it's really fun to watch how all this evolves. Why am I telling you this? Oh, because my editor says to me, she had so many things that she made me like totally rework or cut, or she was hard on me in a great way. But she was like, "Is being elective deaf a thing?" And I was like, "Did you go there?" And she's like, "Yeah, I bought it. I went there. I totally went with you." So I went to school for counseling, My mom made me do this before I was allowed to be a performing songwriter full time. She's like, you need to fall back. Being a musician's hard. So I went to school and I got my degree in counseling. And once I had my bachelor's, she said, well, you can't do anything with that. You gotta go get your master's. So I get my master's, and I love delving into all of the stuff, just how powerful and amazing our minds are, how we deal with trauma. That stuff just lights me up, right? And I was that's my defense of her being elective deaf. I'm like, we can make multiple personalities in our own heads to protect ourselves, and she had this trauma that, you know, she couldn't hear another thing after something she had heard ruined her life. So she went deaf.
And I went there, definitely.
You went there with me?
Yeah, I did. And that is one of the things I really appreciated about your book. You believe it, you know, that this couple gets so close, and that, you know, nothing else happens. There's like,
That's the most
okay,
unbelievable part.
I'm hung up on that, right? But there's a point in the book where there's a baby, and they didn't generate it, but it's in their lives, and it's just so real. I really appreciated that, and I don't think I'll reveal too much by saying there's something that happens with the baby that then they have to.
This was my question starting out before I wrote anything. What happens when two strangers survive this deadly thing and get this orphan baby to take care of together? These two strangers have to now parent. I mean, you know how hard it is to parent with someone you love and already trust and adore, and now they're going to parent this child that's not even their own together.
And they don't know each other.
And it's hysterically funny to me, the situations they get into.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else laughs. I laugh out loud. Even I go back to it and read it now and laugh.
Well, I am impressed as an author of 2 or 3 books that have been published, and, you know, multiple short stories and things. I'm just really impressed with the flow of it and how it, you know, it's all woven in. Did you find that you did it all in one piece, or did it take several months to put together, or how did?
Oh my goodness! It
Well,
took
you had the pandemic
forever.
with it. Yeah.
It took forever, hours and hours every day, all the time. And you know,
But
once
a
it.
part of it was during the pandemic. Most of the writing was during that time.
Yeah, I mean, I probably started it before that, and then the editor got a hold of it in
Challenge you.
January, and so I was back to the drawing board. It was a wonderful learning process. I love it so much, and I know I'll do it for the rest of my life if I'm able.
Great.
Yeah.
And you have a young adult novel. Tell me about that. And
The
it's already
Elixir.
was already.
It's going to the editor this next week.
Oh, great.
And yeah, I got it won me a Writer of the Year from Serious Writer. It's got magical stuff in it. So the first line is, Bean hasn't been allowed to see her uncle since she was 5 years old, and her daddy found him catching her blood in a jar. So her blood has this powers that she hasn't ever been told about, but now that she's turned 17, she's about to turn 18, all this catches up with her. She's half Native American, half Irish American, and so her daddy moved her from the reservation when she was 3 to protect her. So she thought, but was it really to protect everybody else? And this is kind of the dilemma. She's like, I always thought that an unleashed me would have consequences. So this is the whole thing. If I come into my power, if I get to be who I'm supposed to be, that's going to have consequences.
Wow. That sounds great.
And there's a handsome mountain lion shifter, because
There's a handsome what?
mountain lion shifter.
Ah.
Because I was running
Because mountain lions.
on Lookout Mountain, and I thought it was a deer coming out of the woods, and it was a freaking mountain lion, and nobody would believe me, and now people do believe me because they've been caught on film on the mountain. But anyway, so I saw it, and here's what's happened. I was running, so I have my Bluetooth earphones in, right? And I see the mountain lion. I think it's a deer, and then I'm like, it's a cat. It's a freaking, oh my goodness, it's a mountain lion. And it just runs across the road into Little Lake Land Trust, into your waterfall area. And I called Jeff, like, I don't know what to do. I'm running that way. I'm like, it's going to kill me. It didn't seem very interested in me at all. And so I get my phone, and I'm calling Jeff. I put my earphones back in my bag. I call. I'm like, I just freaking saw a mountain lion. And as we're talking, my Bluetooth earphones pick up the call. They're in my bag. So all Jeff hears is, I saw a mountain lion. And he's like, I literally grabbed the shotgun and I was heading to find you. But I called him. I was like, no, I'm back, I'm fine. But that mountain lion image just was so strong to me. I posted about it and everybody's like, no, you saw a bobcat. I'm like, it's not a bobcat, it's a pigtail. And so I think it just became, it had to come out in the story somehow.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun.
There, it's got to be in a story.
I know. It was fun because my mama, who doesn't love that genre, any magical stuff, she likes the Locke Box because it's a for real earth love story. But she's like, I followed you there. I was talking about Chelsea, the mountain lion character. I was like, oh, and then the mountain lion said or did. She's like, just like he was a real guy.
That's great. I guess this is a good time to open up for questions and see if anybody has any questions about the writing process, or how you balance all this, or the stories that we've alluded to. Anybody? Yes.
Just a real general question that gets back to very basics. I know dozens and dozens of people, some friends, some just acquaintances, who I consider extremely good writers. And they've written, just about all of them have written books. And without exception, every one of them has had at least a rejection, if not dozens of rejections.
Yeah.
They never got anywhere. And some just gave up, a couple of them self-published. But I come to these writers' festivals, and all of you talked about, gee, I wanted your history about how you became writers, and you have books all over the table. There must be a point in your lives where there must have been a struggle point.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, no. No, there's no struggle. That's a great question.
Probably a good answer to that is to, unfortunately, confess to how long it's taken me to do each of my books. It's a long time, and part of that is the rejection process. But part of it is also, I just love to research, and I love to get into my
You
characters.
are thorough.
Yeah, a little bit too thorough.
No, you know your stuff. Like, she asked me about, how'd you research the Locke Box? I was like, I dated a guy from Texas once.
Well, to follow up, though, I mean, some of these people I'm talking about were actually researchers.
Right.
They worked in laboratories and other places where they were hands-on and very detailed information,
Yeah.
and they could write that into something that was a very unusual story.
That's great.
Never got published. What is it that they missed?
It's a hard thing to say. When I hear a description of someone's background, I used to do career counseling, so I'm very analytical about people's backgrounds and where it might lead to, in terms of a career. Writers just, throw me off totally. Who is it Barbara Kingsolver, who's basically a biologist? Others, who's the Diane Galdon? She's a lab technician. I mean, her background is science. So I get a little jealous when I see people with that right brain skill turning to the left brain and doing so dang good. But I think it's for one thing, I would say it's persistence, and like Henry Miller said, I've done all these other things. I couldn't do anything else. I had to write.
You can do everything else. She's been a professional in so many different things.
I did start out wanting to be a writer. And I got to college, and they didn't have a writing major, but they had, a minor. But nothing like journalism. I thought I wanted to be like Hemingway. I mean, he was a reporter first, and then he went to all these places. I wanted to be like Hemingway. I didn't read him all that much, but I wanted to be like him. I mean, all these lives he had: Paris, Spain, Cuba. That unfortunate thing out west. Where was it? Utah, wherever he did himself in. But that part I didn't like, but the rest of it was really interesting, and I wanted to be like that. So I got waylaid by, getting a career, but I did work. My first job was, my first professional job was with United Press International in Atlanta as a reporter. And so I had that background where I was learning about it. And then I got into making a living, which ended up being editing and then management training. I got a master's in psychology at West Georgia College. And so I was doing more teaching, coaching, and counseling and salary administration and all these things to corporations, communication, all kinds of things like that. And after a while, I got to a point where my own health was a factor. I had to take some time out, and I really got in touch with, you were going to be a writer. That was your plan. That was your plan. What happened to that? And I had time on the Georgia coast. My husband and I happened to have property down there we were developing, so I spent a lot of time looking at wood storks or trying to find wood storks or, getting into birding, all these things that I never would have, as a fast-paced person, I never would have done before. So I was getting into the mindset of it. But I spent a lot of time watching other people. I remember that I learned how to water ski the first time, got up the first time because I'd watched a lot of people water ski when I didn't have a chance. So that's kind of what I did in terms of writing. And I also went to people who were acknowledged as being good. They were either heads of departments of creative writing at Virginia, North Carolina, and places like that, where they were well recognized by the New York Times, not bestseller, but notable books of 1993 or whatever. So I just apprenticed myself in the form of workshops to people like that. So I saw a lot of people as they struggled themselves to get published. Lena Williams, one of the best short story writers in the country, couldn't get a novel published. She could get short stories published, but she could train at Emory University, where she was. She could train a heck of a lot of people. Brought in Ha Jin, who became I think he was a Pulitzer Prize winner, probably one of the best books from Chinese background. Toni Grooms was one of her friends. All these people, they struggled. I saw them struggle and sometimes get turned down. So it was a real strong yin with me to get published. It took 10 years for me to write Abbeville Farewell. Of course, there was a lot of research there, but it was also learning fiction writing, which is different from expository or reporting and nonfiction. And so it just takes a while, and then sometimes you get lucky. I had one book traditionally published, The Seed of South Sudan, that I co-wrote with Majak Mary, or one of the Lost Boys of Sudan. And a friend of mine just happened to say, you want to get published? And here's a tip for everybody who wants to get published. There is a publisher called McFarlane and Company that really likes research. They publish the books that are in libraries about any topic. Transportation, African American history, battles, personalities. A friend of mine was not into NASCAR, but her husband said, you want to get published? You want to get tradition published? You write a book about that guy. He was a church member. His name was Rex White, and he was one of the NASCAR legends. But Rex had left NASCAR in the 1950s when he lost his sponsorship. But he was the winningest driver on the circuit. She interviewed him, and McFarlane bought it, bought the book, and it went into 4 printings. And he was very quiet and reserved. You can't shut him up now. He's everywhere. Everybody knows who Rex White is. So it's like there are these publishers out there that need books. This publisher is academic. It's not showing up in bookstores, so you're not going to get book scan totals or anything like that. But they publish books that are used by libraries for research. So I sent a picture and an outline and maybe 1 chapter to McFarlane, and they bought it right away. So that's the difference, is knowing who you can get published by, who is more likely. So it is a kind of hit or miss, but it's unfortunate.
A totally different story, because I've been an indie musician for decades now, and we've released everything on our own, which is cool in the music community and not as cool in the literary community. In fact, Estelle was like, no, you need to shop it, you need to get an agent, you need to shop it. That's legit, that's considered legit. And I'm like, that didn't sit well with me. And I talked to a publisher. I was going to have a publisher take it. We had done some work with her with the kids' music and education stuff. And she's like, we're going to publish this for you because this book needs to get out there. But we just published it ourselves, because why not? We've done all the other stuff, and we know the business side of it, and we don't care if we're best-selling, whatever, We just want to make the best art we can make and do it legitimately as independent authors. or musicians or whatever. So, and I think the tide is turning on that. I think it's becoming more legit as long as it's done well and it's not just half-assed, you know.
That's true.
I have a question.
Jenny?
I have a question for you, Jennifer. So as a musician and a songwriter, what do you do first? Write your lyrics and then put music to it, or do you know your melody and then you put the lyrics to it?
As a songwriter, I tend to just get my guitar and start thumping away with some different chords, changing up the time signatures and just feeling it out. Maybe I'm feeling sad that day, whatever. But the music tends to come first for me. Are you a songwriter?
No, but my husband is.
Okay. What's he do? Does he do words or music first?
He finds another song that he likes first, and then he plays that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, playing that song that you really like, and then all of a sudden you're making it your own, and it's changing up, and it becomes your own thing. Yeah, I tend to do the music first. Jeff often will write really great. We should play one if we have time. Jeff will write the song first, and come here's the music, and then I'll fill the words in as we play along with it. I'm not sure I've ever done it. I probably have done it reversed before, but. We had a fun time yesterday because it was all writers in the workshop. So we did, the word prompt exercise, and then we talked about, okay, now how do we meld that with the music? They weren't necessarily musicians who came to the songwriter shop, but most of them were writers. So they were all familiar with the writing prompts, and they were just writing these amazing, there were poets there, and novelists, and all kinds of people who were great. And so then when we started putting it to the music, it was just super fun to have that conversation, and how are we going to do it into a workshop, a couple songs.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
I want to make this quick because I do want to hear another song while we have
Oh,
time for it,
that's
but,
good.
do we have one? Okay, so I read both books, loved them both. Ms. Ford-Williamson, I'd like to thank you for the understanding and the diversity of characters that you present. I'm still mad at Willie.
Oh.
Just so you know, I have
Willie gets,
forgiven him.
people get mad at Willie.
I'm mad at him right now.
Forgiven him, clearly, but no, I have not gotten that point yet. So, Ms. Daniels Neal, I wanted to ask you, do you feel that their story is done? Is there going to be another bit to what's going on with Locke? And is there anything there? And I wanted to know when the Elixir is coming out.
Okay, the Elixir does not have a release date, but it's going to the developmental art editor this coming week. So hopefully I will be able to do the rewrites in a matter of months, and then it'll go to the copy editor, and it will be on its way. So hopefully in this time next year, possibly, but hopefully in 2022. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Fantastic.
What was the other question?
Oh, if Locke's story is done,
Oh.
is there a little bit more to
That is the
it?
question. People are pushing me to do a sequel.
Yes.
At first,
I am pushing
oh,
you.
thank you. Hey, there's a free little novelette that's not their story, but it's a similar story on anywhere, Amazon, iBooks, whatever. That you guys are welcome to grab. And on the mailing list, I have the soubrette, which is a follow-up to the rucksack I just talked about, and it's just sort of this sassy little, sexy but clean novella. So if you want more right now of that kind of thing, they're out there.
Would they go to JenniferDaniels.com? JenniferDanielsNeal.com?
You can go to JenniferDaniels.com, or I have a little QR code that you can just scan up there and get the novelette for sign. It's a trade. You're signing up on my mailing list, which you can get off of anytime you want. But then you get the novelette digitally, the novella digitally if you want. Yeah, or you can go to Amazon or anywhere and just search me. But maybe about a sequel. I was like, no, their story's done. They've done the thing. But the more people kept doing that, and then there would just be this niggling little idea. I did leave this thing open. Maybe that could be something. Or maybe we follow Annabelle into her life. I love them so much. I hate for it to be over.
That's right. You don't have to have it be over. You can do a sequel, or more. That's great. No other questions. I'm gonna JenniferDaniels.com. Mine is Estelle Ford-Williamson.com.
With the hyphen, yeah.
And our books are on there. Her books are on there, and her tour dates. Yay, tour dates! And You might want to get on that mailing list because that way you'll hear when she's going to be. You never know where they're going to be.
I'm
They're
coming back
everywhere.
here. I'm already hitting Jonathan up, trying to get back to the Pat Conroy Center.
Great.
You gonna play one?
Sure.
Take them out. Come on up. Are we gonna do that cute little love song?